Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon His last messenger Muhammad, and upon all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. We welcome you once again, dear viewers, to another episode on the Hereafter. Another in a series of Islamic programs presented to you by Sharjah Satellite Television from Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. We've been talking in previous episodes about the moments leading up to death, and then we started talking about the moments when the soul now is leaving the body. We mentioned the incident with Mu'adh bin Jabal, that when he was dying, he welcomed death. When he was dying, he said, "Welcome, O death, I've been waiting for you for a long time. I've been waiting for the promise of Allah to me. Welcome, death." He said, "O death, don't think that I ever wanted to live in this dunya, that I ever wanted to stay in this world because of the love of this world. The reason why I wanted to live in this world was to fast in the hot summer days and to pray in the night during the long, cold winter nights. So as long as now it is time for me to leave, time for my soul to leave, then I welcome you. Take my soul." This was Mu'adh bin Jabal at the time of his death, welcoming death. Also, a hadith narrated by Bukhari, in which the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, said that every prophet, at the time of his death, before he dies, he is shown his place in paradise, and he is given the choice to stay in this world or to die. Every prophet of Allah, that before he dies, at the time of his death, Allah has shown him his place in Jannah, his place in paradise. And the prophets are given the choice to remain in this world or to die. And so the Anbiya, they are given the choice. And Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she said that when the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, when he was dying, he was saying, "O Allah, the highest companion. O Allah, the highest companion." And she said that when he was saying that, when she heard him saying that, she knew that at that moment the angels, they were showing the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, they were showing him his place in paradise. He was being given the choice. He was shown his place in paradise, and the choice was given to him to stay or to remain in this world or to die. And she said that I knew when I heard him saying, "O Allah, the highest companion, O Allah, the highest companion," she said, I knew that he was being given the choice and that he did not choose us, meaning that he had chosen the paradise, to be with Allah, the highest companion. And that was the last words that the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, that he spoke before dying. He was given that choice, and he was saying, "O Allah, the highest companion." And Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she said, I knew at that moment he was being given that choice, and that he was not choosing us. That he was given the choice, and he was not choosing to stay in this world, but rather choosing to go through death and to go back to Allah. The Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, also, he tells us in a lengthy hadith a story about the soul when it leaves the body. The soul, the trip that the soul takes as it's leaving the body. Because the Anbiya, we mentioned, they're given the choice. But this is for the Anbiya, for the prophets. For the human being, the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he described in a hadith this journey that the soul takes when it's leaving the body. The Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said that when the soul is dying, when the believer is dying and the soul is preparing to leave the body, the angels, they come down from Jannah with a coffin from Jannah and some scent, perfume from Jannah, and they descend. They descend and they sit in front of that person, and then the angel of death descends. First some angels descend, carrying with them a coffin from Jannah and some scent from Jannah. And then the angel of death descends and tells the believer to be happy and pleased with the promise of Allah for you. The angel of death comes and descends, sitting next to the person, and tells that person, be pleased with the promise of Allah for you. And then he calls for the soul to come out. The angel of death announces to that person to be pleased, because the promise of Allah, you will be pleased with the promise of Allah for you. And then he calls for the soul of that believer to come out. He says, "O you soul in the state of tranquility, come out." The angel of death now is calling the soul out of the body. He says, "Come out to the pleasure that will be provided to you by Allah." He's calling the soul out. Not just to come out, but come out to the pleasure that will be provided to you by Allah. Come out to the pleasure of Allah. The Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said that that soul will come out so easily that it is like a drop of water falling from a jug. It is like pouring a drop of water. The soul will leave the body so easily. And as soon as the angel of death takes the soul, the soul leaves the body, the angel of death takes the soul. As soon as it takes the soul, then all of the angels would jump. All of the angels would jump, because every one of them wants to take the honor of taking that soul and wrapping it in its coffin. And then they would carry it up into the heavens. And the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said that whenever they would carry it next to a group of angels, they would smell this beautiful scent. And they would say, "Whose soul is this?" They would question, "Whose soul is this?" As they're going up through the heavens, anytime they pass by any group of angels, they would smell the beautiful scent coming from the soul, and they would ask, they would inquire, "Whose soul is this?" And the angels would tell them that this is the soul of so-and-so. And they would call him with the best names, until they reached the gate of the lowest heaven. And then they would seek permission to enter. And then the gates of that heaven would open up. And whenever this soul is being carried through a heaven, as it's progressing through the heavens, the angels of that heaven will accompany it until the next heaven. The angels are coming and accompanying that soul as it's going up through the heavens. And angels are surrounding the soul all the way up until it reaches Allah. This is the soul of the believer, the soul of the righteous person. Then Allah will deliver the promise of Jannah, the promise of paradise to that soul. And then Allah will say, He will command saying, "Take that soul back to earth, because that is where I created him from, and that is where they would return, and that is from where they will be resurrected." And so the soul would then descend back down through the heavens with the honor of Allah. Then the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he tells us what happens to the soul of the non-believer. The believer, it's coming, the angel of death comes, the angels descend with a coffin from Jannah, with the scent from Jannah. The angel of death descends, commands the soul to come out to the pleasure of Allah. The angels accompany that soul up through the heavens until it reaches Allah, where then Allah gives it the promise of His pleasure, and then commands them to bring that soul back down to the earth, because that is where Allah created it from, that is where it would return, and that is from where Allah would resurrect that soul. As for the non-believer, the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said that for the non-believer or for the evildoer, the angels come down with a coffin from hellfire. And they come next to him, and the angel of death would stand next to him. The angels come down with a coffin from hellfire, then the angel of death would come down and stand next to him and say, "Oh, you evil soul, come out to the punishment of Allah and His anger." And so that soul would disperse around the body, trying to cling to every nerve and muscle, trying to avoid to leave, because it's being called out now by the angel of death. But it's not being called out to the pleasure of